becomes the only source of money for healthcare. It means that the single payer is not just some random single payer, it is the government. So it is socialized medicine, it is a government monopoly on healthcare. So, and everything that brings along with it. In my opinion, the purpose of Obamacare is to clear the way for single payer by eliminating private health insurance. That is, and how do they do that? What I believe we're going to do, they've only begun to do it now, but they're going to do it more and more, is they're going to drive up the requirements for what counts as a private health care program, and they're going to drive down the premiums that can be charged. They're going to squeeze the health insurance companies in such a situation where the minimum requirements for a health insurance policy are above what you can offer it at the premiums they're going to allow you to charge. Again, that's a projection. It's my opinion. We're going to have to see, but that's what I think is going to happen.
They're already doing it.
You're right. They are. We're already seeing that happen. So it's not purely prediction. So here's a question for you. Here's a quote, and this is what I call the "let it crash" strategy on Obamacare. Let it crash. Just let it go forward. It won't last. It's a Frankenstein monster of policy. It can't survive. Just let it go forward and end. It won't survive. The quote is this: "What we're trying to do is let Obama be a failure. Otherwise, it's Republicans stopped us from achieving what you wanted. We do not want to stop Obamacare." And I think these governors, and he was referring to governors that had funded the Medicaid exchanges to support Obamacare, I think these governors are probably pretty smart. We won't lose if Obamacare gets passed, gets bad. We lose if it goes in limbo. Okay, now here's a quiz, and if you know the answer, don't pipe up. It was a Republican. Who do y'all think said that? That was your congressman. That was your congressman who said that. What we're trying to do is let Obama be a failure. Otherwise, it's Republicans stopped us from achieving what you wanted. We do not want to stop it. Okay? So keep that in mind when you hear that there's going to be some effort in some time in the future to fight against Obamacare. This is the strategy. Okay, wait. I guess we're going forward with this, right? To the next section. Yeah, we are. Yeah. What's that? Yes, yes. So here's the question, and this is one of the arguments that's put up in opposition to the idea of it's kind of a fallback argument. The fallback argument on Obamacare is, well, we don't really want to stop it, but even if we did want to stop it, it would be devastating to our troops. We can't allow there to be a government shutdown. Now, first of all, there was a lot of deception in the use of the term government shutdown. A lot of people use that term, but the term government shutdown is deceptive because there's no way to shut down the federal government. In reality, you can't shut down the government the way that you shut down your car, turn it off, take your keys out, and go to the house. There's not any policies or procedures in place to do that. What there is the ability to temporarily suspend non-essential government services. That is a possibility. You can temporarily suspend the funding for non-essential government services. And when Obama talks about a government shutdown, when the media talks about a government shutdown, what they're really referring to is a temporary suspension of non-essential government services. And I raised this with Wade, and Wade had generously agreed to kind of give us a summary of what a shutdown or what a temporary suspension means, what it doesn't mean, and whether or not it would affect the troops and our veterans and services. So, Wade, if you would, go ahead and give that presentation.
I'm going to address this, part of this as from my official position with Heritage Action, and part of this as a veteran myself. A temporary suspension of non-essential services, or a slowdown, or whatever you really want to call it, which is way more accurate than calling it a shutdown, is basically where the OMB, which is an executive branch agency, they have broad authority to determine who is emergency personnel and who is not. So essentially, commanders in the field and the executive branch can essentially exempt almost all of the military, certainly everyone that's deployed, certainly almost every single active duty person, if not all of them. And so this theory that veterans won't get paid just isn't true. And if it is actually put into effect, it's because of a discretionary decision by the president himself. So they can't blame this on a shutdown because they're the ones that are making this decision. Now, on top of this, if a shutdown were to go into effect on the 2nd, military people get their pay on the 1st and 15th or the 29th and 14th, depending on the type of bank you have, whether it's a federal military bank or just a commercial bank. If a shutdown were to go into effect on the 2nd, and the last shutdown, I can't remember how long it lasted in the 90s. Does anyone remember 4 or 5 days maybe? Or?
It was longer than that.
Okay. Right. So, but the point is that it would unlikely affect any paychecks. So the military is probably not going to have their paychecks affected, and even if it were, they would get back pay. So essentially what you're looking at is a paid vacation. But the fact is that hardly anyone, if at all, would not be getting their paychecks. Other things like Social Security still get sent out. Medicare and Medicaid still get sent out. The post office still operates because it's on its own funding. It's self-funded anyways. Well, not really, but it is technically self-funded. So this idea that the military is going to be affected and we can't take advantage of our soldiers, that's a myth. This is not true. This is, in my opinion, and I'm taking my hat off and speaking personally from my own point of view here, this is rhinos trying to run from the fight, and they're using the veterans as an excuse. I have also talked to, I've called many banks, specifically banks that deal with the military on home mortgages. I've talked to their mortgage departments. They have plans in place to deal with, if something were to affect anyone in the military, to make sure that they're not paying late fees, to make sure they're not paying fines for missing a payment. And I assume that this would go for car dealerships, because what company wants to be known as the company that's dinging and taking advantage of veterans? That would be a PR nightmare. These are all fictitious claims that are coming from the left and from the rhinos, and it's just, it's abhorrent. And on another note, and this is my opinion, not that of Heritage Action, but as a veteran, the last thing that I want to see happen is for Republicans to allow Barack Obama to use me as a hostage to give them an excuse for not doing the right thing. When I signed up, as a veteran, I was in the infantry, I slept in the dirt, I slept in the cold, I slept in the snow, I slept in the rain, I was hungry, I was tired. I made a lot of sacrifices. I had buddies who were killed in action, guys I served with, guys in my unit, I have guys who were maimed pretty significantly. We made a lot of sacrifices. And we want the people to be out there to support the Republicans who are going to fight hard on this, because we are ready to sacrifice again, even if the president takes our paychecks, because this would be his call. This is an OMB decision. If he does it, that's the president's fault, and the leadership of the Republican Party should have the cojones to get up there and say, that's wrong and what you did is wrong, and we're not going to fall for this. We're not going to allow you to take advantage of our military and make them prisoners in this debate.
That's right.
Ken and I just had a minor disconnect here, and I want to make one point, I'm sure everybody understands it. We're not saying that there isn't at least theatrical opposition to Obamacare in the Republican rhinos. We're not saying that. They have voted, I don't know, 40 times now to get rid of Obamacare, because they know this is nothing more than theatrics for your benefit, and nobody else takes it seriously. The only thing we're talking about tonight is defunding Obamacare in the upcoming September 30th continuing resolution. That is what needs to happen if anybody up there is serious about getting rid of Obamacare.
One of the other issues that's been raised is one of the scare tactics, I think, and I think Wade is right about that, is the idea that if we go and fight, if the Republicans go in and fight on the spending issues, and it's not just the Obamacare fight, but that's the most recent one, that's the one we're talking about right now, that if we go in and fight, well, all the turmoil will be a backlash against the Republicans, and then we'll just be handing the Speaker's gavel back over to Ms. Pelosi there. And I wanted to address that, because there are some people that would be a persuasive argument if true. So let's talk about whether there's any truth to that. There was a recent poll that was done, and the poll that they conducted, it was conducted in 10 different congressional districts. And the congressional districts that they picked were districts that leaned toward the Republican side. They were more Republican than Democrat, but 4 of them were actually currently represented by Democrats, and 6 of them were currently represented by Republicans. So these are the sorts of swing districts that would be of concern if there's a strong public backlash against a public fight with the president over that would result in a temporary suspension of government services. And they asked a number of questions, and I've excerpted some of them here. One of the questions, do you think it would be appropriate for Congress to temporarily halt funding for the health care law before the provisions of Obamacare take effect to make sure they did not do more harm than good? That's one of the questions. Another one, in order to let the President Obama agree to at least a timeout on implementing the health care law and its full effects, would you approve or disapprove of a temporary slowdown in non-essential federal government operations, which still left all essential government services running? If a member of Congress voted to continue the full and immediate implementation of the Obama health care plan, would that make you more or less likely to vote to re-elect him or her to Congress? If your member of Congress did everything he or she could to slow down the implementation of the Obama health care plan, including voting to stop its funding, would that make you more or less likely to vote to re-elect him or her to Congress? I think this is a pretty good sample of questions we would want to know how the public feels about these questions. And so they compiled the answers and they published them, and I put them in chart form here so we can kind of look at them. Look at this. This is the first question that I just read to you. The answer as to whether or not they support slowing it down was almost 70%. Almost 70%. And this was not just a poll of Republicans. This was not just a poll of conservatives. And it was not just a poll of heavily conservative or Republican districts. These were swing districts. 70% of the voters in the Republican districts believe that they should, that there should be a timeout, essentially. Now this one was very interesting as far as whether or not they would approve or disapprove of a slowdown. But look at here. This is the approve down here. Look at that number. Almost 60% would approve of that. And again, this is not Republicans. This is not conservatives. This is all the voters in those districts being polled. The ones that disapproved were not even quite 30%. These are the people that were so terrified of these 30% that might disapprove.
And we're add up to 100% that is you code.
No, what happened? You got it. I'm sorry, I didn't explain it very well. The approved bar is then broken down into strongly approved and somewhat approved. Oh yeah, because I don't know and refuse to read or 11.6. But yeah, the disapprove is then broken into somewhat disapprove and strongly disapprove. The ones that strongly disapprove was only 18.3%. But look at the strong approve, over 30% on the ones that approved of that. So with these kind of numbers, my question to Pete Sessions is, what is the basis for this idea that you would somehow face a serious backlash in public opinion if there was a temporary slowdown?
Especially in this district.
Especially in this district, which is a strongly Republican district. He won this by 60% against his last Democratic opponent. Almost 60%.
Next time.
What's that?
Not next time.
Well, there might not be a next time, so we'll see. If you're a member of Congress, voted to continue the full and immediate implementation of Obama health care plan, would that make you more or less likely to vote to re-elect him or her to Congress? Look at the less likely number. Look at the much less likely number. Over 40% are much less likely to vote for him. Okay? These are the numbers. And then the last one. Again, this is the question on whether or not you would vote to re-elect them if they did everything they could to stop it. You know, the numbers speak for themselves. This is polling. This is 1,000 votes. It's very statistically significant information. And yet, they're telling us that they're terrified because there would be such a massive backlash against slowing down the government temporarily. This is all polling data, but we can also look at history. Because I actually had somebody tell me this, somebody that was trying to defend what the Republican leadership has been doing. And they said, well, you know, look back to '96, look at what happened to the House leadership in '96 and all that, the election of '96. Okay, well, it's just by way of recollection, in the '95 to '96 time frame, you may remember that Newt Gingrich as Speaker and Bill Clinton as President were back and forth fighting over cutting spending and balancing the budget. And it led to an extended suspension of non-essential services, or what they call a shutdown. That took place in late 95 and early 96, like in the December-January timeframe. Now, we obviously had the election in 94 that led to the takeover by the Republicans. Now look at the number of the next election in 1996. Can you show me where the bloodbath was? Can you show me where the wipeout happened? It didn't happen, okay? In the next election, the Democrats took 2 more seats than they had before the election. And that was in a year when we had Bob Dole at the top of the ticket against Bill Clinton. So, do the math. Now, there was a wipeout, there was a bloodbath, and it took place in 2006. But I can promise you, if you recall, it did not happen because the Republicans fought too hard. I was walking precincts in 2006 in Dallas County, and I was coming back and reporting that we were in for a real hard time on Election Day in the Republican Party, because I was getting Republican doors. I mean, you look at your walk list, it tells you who are the Republicans. I was getting Republican doors slammed on my face. People told me I was a fool to walk for those guys, and why was I wasting my time? And I heard that over and over again. So I knew going into that we were in for a hard time on Election Day. And the reality was, it had nothing to do with them fighting too hard. It had to do with them not fighting at all against them. One more point here. If you look at 96, remember I told you that the shutdown, the slowdown was right at the end of 95 and the beginning of 96. You'll see there, look at the president's approval, Clinton's approval when there was a shutdown. That tells you they felt the pressure of it just as much or more than the House members did. There will be a backlash against Obama. If there's a backlash, it'll be against Obama. And there might be some backlash against the Republicans too. But sometimes there's risk in life. Sometimes doing the right thing carries a little bit of risk. But the point I'm trying to make here is, to the extent there's risk, it's certainly not anything clear, and it's certainly not anything that's compelling one way or the other. Or it's not compelling that there would be a backlash and that it would cost them seats. Again, my position is, even if there was, they should throw some and do it. But pardon my French. But one thing, there is another countervailing argument to this claim that they will lose seats. Let's look at the election of 2014. If the Republicans have handed us amnesty, they've handed us one debt limit increase after another, they've handed us a continuing funding of Obamacare, they've given us no investigation of IRS, Benghazi, any of the incredible scandals of this Obama administration, they've continued to roll over for the Obama administration. There is a very real risk in that case that the Republican-based voters say, what's the point of voting for you? Right? So there is a very strong and real risk that if they don't stand up and start fighting, that the base will stay home, and that will happen as we saw in 2006. That will go them off at the polls. So that's my presentation on this, and I appreciate your time. I guess we're going to take some questions, or we have time for that? Yeah, we can take some questions if you guys like.
Good evening. My name is Larry Kropp, and I am from Garland.
Hello, Larry.
How you doing? I think the lady from the last round with David Folkall was correct, because maybe I'm his employee and he's my employer. I've been a diabetic for 30 years. I have an eye that's starting to go out from the disease, and I'm only in my 40s. And I can see a time in my 60s in which the medication becomes so expensive for a death penalty, they just say, Larry Kropp's not working. It pains me that I have to go to my congressman to beg for his mercy to help me out of the situation. But that's where I am. Congressman, I need you to do everything you can to kill this, start with death, yank the money out, and call it a day.
This man's comment, because he's exactly right. I don't know if any of y'all saw a Wall Street Journal article a week ago about the guy who went to his doctor, big editorial, I've got it, about the guy who goes to the doctor and needs a routine hernia operation. And he's got true insurance, not just prepaid health care, which is what a lot of us actually have. he had true insurance. And so they go and they check with the hospital, and the hospital says, well, you know, it costs this much, it's Y, Z, and then you've got to pay the difference. He says, well, okay, how much is the total deal?